We have a huge overprescribing problems with antidepressants. Last month, a significant number of psychiatric leaders and politicians voiced concerns in the British Medical Journal. This is a highly regarded medical journal. They were urging the government to address the issue of escalating antidepressant prescriptions in the UK. This issue gained massive traction in news outlets, and it was reported in The Guardian, The Daily Mail, Politico, Times Radio, and even Good Morning Britain. And it revealed that 20% of the British population were now taking antidepressants, and that there were similar rates in Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. Alarmingly, this figure has doubled in the last decade. And for a medication class that has such substantial risks and a drug effect that is barely higher than placebo, this is absolutely crazy. And honestly, it's probably the same in the US or even worse. What I think was really noteworthy about this was actually that in Britain, they have more stringent guidelines regarding antidepressant prescriptions than in the US. For instance, they're not really recommended as first-line treatments in the UK unless specifically requested by patients. And so what I really wanted to know was, why is this all happening and how did this situation come to exist? And so today, I'm going to be discussing how multiple forces have led to the disgraceful and dangerous overuse of antidepressants worldwide. And at the end of the video, we're going to talk about what I think can be done to prevent this. So number one, I think there is a problem with depression disease mongering. The first factor that we're going to consider is how these disease awareness campaigns have contributed to overprescription. So these are campaigns designed to educate the public about various conditions and the availability of treatments. While these depression awareness campaigns can have positive effects, especially maybe for groups that are less likely to seek help due to shame. Think about like maybe men with depression. There's a caveat with this. These campaigns often carry a strong commercial agenda. And this became particularly evident with depression coinciding around the introduction of Prozac. Now, the pharmaceutical companies at this time began to invest heavily in mental health awareness campaigns. This was clearly driven by a commercial agenda. They were trying to broaden the market for their drug. Their core strategy was to educate the public about depression. And then at the end of these educational ads and campaigns and news articles, they would advise patients to talk to their doctors. Now, the increased awareness in principle wouldn't be problematic if it was matched by a medical workforce capable of delivering effective results for depression. Unfortunately, that is not really the case. So many in the medical workforce who are largely influenced by pharmaceutical marketing, they tend to overestimate the benefits of these drugs, and they're largely unaware of the potential harms. And given these circumstances, these awareness campaigns did not really lead to people getting better care. Instead, they contributed to a culture of overprescribing. The issue lies not just in raising awareness about depression, but also in how these campaigns integrate with the medical system. And if the medical system is set up for short transactional visits and the people working in that system don't really understand the risks and benefits, it can lead to overprescription and a lot of harm. The next force that has led to overprescription is the limited awareness of the risks among healthcare professionals. Many healthcare professionals are not aware of risks such as PSSD, which is the post-SSRI sexual dysfunction, and also severe problems such as protracted withdrawal injury. And even though these conditions are now internationally recognized by many groups and are widely reported in the medical literature, doctors simply aren't aware of them. The lack of awareness about these things can have serious implications for prescribing decisions, because if patients were truly informed of the risks of these drugs, it's likely many of them would not take them. Given the risks of these medications, it is really my opinion now that they should be reserved for only patients with the most severe depression and anxiety that has not resolved to alternative treatments. And I strongly suspect that general practitioners and family medicine doctors would not be prescribing these medications if they were truly aware of all of the risks associated with them. The next force that's led to overprescribing is that patients are simply unaware of the risks of antidepressants. Most of them believe that they're safe, and this is largely because they're frequently prescribed by their doctors, and their doctors often reassure them of their safety. But it's also the mainstream media discussion of antidepressants, which tends to be mostly positive and seldom discusses the risks. Unfortunately, the discussion of drug side effects in psychiatry has really become a taboo topic. Now, this has mostly happened actually through bullying tactics. Frequently, what happens when critics start to voice their concerns over drug side effects is that establishment psychiatrists, usually those involved with drug development and several pharmaceutical industry ties, they start to attack the critics. Usually they attack the critics in two ways. The first thing they'll say is that they're being alarmist and that there is simply not enough evidence to support that this risk is even real. And they'll say these things, but at the same time, they don't really make any effort to fund the research or talk to the pharmaceutical companies and get the pharmaceutical companies to look into it. And the drug companies, they don't really care, because if they can just say that more research is needed, usually by the time any of that research comes out, the drug is already off patent and they don't really make any money off it anymore. The other thing that they usually do is they just accuse the critic of being alarmist for some kind of alternative reason, such as, believing that mental illness isn't real, or that it shouldn't be treated with medications, or that people should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Unfortunately, this narrative has been the one that's mostly been taken hold of by the media. And now discussions of medication risks are frequently viewed as stigmatizing the mentally ill for some reason. So consequently, the media avoids these issues and the public remains largely uninformed about the risks of these medications. Now, the next reason for overprescription is simply that once you start these medications, they can be very difficult to stop. Unfortunately, a lot of doctors out there think that antidepressant withdrawal is mild and self-limiting. This is not the case for everyone. In fact, there are a lot of people who, when they stop the medication, they'll have severe and enduring withdrawal symptoms. Unfortunately, doctors, and sometimes even the patients themselves, they'll misinterpret this as the underlying condition and they'll just stay on the medications. And so the only way to really stop these medications safely in a way that doesn't flare up symptoms and lead people to go back on the drugs is by doing a very slow and gradual withdrawal. The good news, at least, is that on this front, mainstream groups such as the Royal College of Psychiatrists have finally acknowledged this. They've started to put out a lot of information about how to do slow and gradual withdrawals. And I'm hoping that with this improved medical education, that patients who actually want to stop these medications can come off safely. Now, the next issue that's led to overprescribing of these medications has been a change in the way we deliver healthcare. And this has to do with the way family medicine works. You've probably noticed when you've seen your doctor lately that the visits are getting shorter and shorter. You might have a 25-minute visit, but you'll only have about 5 minutes of FaceTime with the doctor. This is because there's a lot of corporate medicine influences going on. A lot of these family medicine clinics, they're owned by private equity or big hospital chains that have a huge profit motive. Now, what these groups really don't like about psychiatry is that it takes a lot of time. If someone's coming in with depression, this is not something that you can diagnose like a UTI. You don't get the person to pee into a cup and run a test and say, okay, you have this bacteria, now you just need this antibiotic. It's a lot more time intensive. You need to really understand the person in front of you and what's going on in their life. Now, because this runs counter to corporate medicine influences where they want people to be seen in as little time as possible, what usually happens is people are simply diagnosed with scales now. They'll do a depression scale, they'll get asked a few superficial questions, and that's it. Also, helping people who are unhappy is very time intensive. Usually it involves understanding why they're unhappy and then telling them where to go or where to go in terms of what specialist to see or how they may improve their life in some other way. That's a very time-intensive process. But what's a lot easier is actually just to write them a prescription for a medication. It's a lot cleaner and faster. And so I think because of these commercial influences where things have to happen faster and faster, that a lot of doctors actually default to giving out medications. The next factor that plays a large role in the overprescription of antidepressants is simply a lack of access to alternative therapies. For anyone who's tried to look for a therapist, this is incredibly difficult. I mean, if you want to find a therapist that's actually on your health insurance, that takes a long time. A lot of them are completely full. A lot of them say they only take cash. It can be very difficult even just to find other ways of treating your depression. And the final factor that I think contributes to the overprescribing of antidepressants is a public perception that depression is a biological illness. Now, I'm not saying this is never the case. I'm not saying there aren't some forms of familial or genetic depression. What I am saying is that the majority of reasons why people are depressed are firmly grounded in life hardship. I know this because I spent thousands of hours working in emergency rooms talking to people about why they're unhappy. People who have just had suicide attempts, all of those things. And I can hardly think of patients where it came completely out of the blue and there weren't significant other factors contributing to their depression. A lot of the reasons why people think depression is due to a strong biological component has to do with a narrative that has been created by people with an agenda to sell medications. Within this narrative, it helps them sell drugs because the more they can make it seem like it's getting at an underlying problem that's due to brain chemistry, the easier it is for people to rationalize taking a medication that's targeted at the level of the brain. Unfortunately, this strong narrative overlooks all of the life hardship issues that contribute to depression, and it leads patients to believe that the best way to get at their depression is by taking a medication and not by engaging in non-drug therapies that might actually be more effective in treating the root causes of their depression. So what are some of the things we could do to address the overprescribing of antidepressants? Well, the first thing is I think that family medicine and GPs should limit their involvement in the prescribing of antidepressants. And this is especially targeted to those who see patients in short visits. If you're only seeing someone for 25 minutes and you have less than 10 minutes to really get to know them, you don't really understand that person. You don't understand what's going on in their life. And if you don't have the time to do it properly, I don't think you should be doing it at all. In those instances, send them to someone who really has the time and the interest in treating depression. The second thing that we should be doing is furthering deprescribing education. We need to be getting out there to the universities and the doctors in the community and giving them resources on how to do slow tapers so that when they do want to bring people off these medications, they do it in a safe way where the person is going to succeed and they're not going to just interpret these withdrawal symptoms as a sign of their underlying condition coming back and just staying on the medication indefinitely. Next, we need to have more of an investment in the non-drug therapies. So many counselors don't take insurance anymore. They simply take cash, and that's because the reimbursement is so low. The government is sending a message that it does not value that type of treatment for mental health. If they improved the reimbursement, more people would go into psychotherapy and it would be more accessible for the patients. This is a much more sustainable way to help people long term. So that's it for today's video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Did I miss any other factors that are contributing to the overprescription of antidepressants? Also, what do you think about the solutions that I came up with? Are there any other solutions that you think would be useful in curbing the overprescription of these medications? Thanks.